First of all, pick out the places where they play the kind of music that you love.
Yeah.
And if you are attracted to those places through the law of attraction, the right people are going to start to come in.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're a young comedian, where would you go? You sign up to do stand up at the Improv or whatever. Yeah. And the guys that booked the Tonight Show came in all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you have to sort of use your energy to through the law of attraction, bring those people to you,
mm-hmm.
or allow yourself to be attracted to their environments.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think if you are a good person, a nice person, a consistent person, if you're not ego-based, if you're not a little whatever,
biznatch.
A little, yes, that will actually happen. You will find yourself in the right place
mm-hmm.
and the right time.
Welcome to the Vocal Lab. I'm Sarah Ramsey, and this show aims to pull back the curtain on the entertainment industry, where veterans give up-and-coming artists some of the information they wish they'd had when they were just starting out. Sort of a music industry primer, if you will. Welcome to the Vocal Lab. Lesley Mitchell-Clarke is with me today, and Lesley is a powerhouse in music publicity, media relations, and arts journalism, with a career spanning decades across North America, Europe, and Japan. Born into a showbiz family, her father, Whitey Mitchell, am I saying that right?
That's
Whitey
it.
was a jazz bassist and Emmy-winning comedy writer, and her uncle, Red Mitchell, was a jazz legend. Lesley immersed herself in the arts early on. She began as a child actress with the Sherman Oaks Children's Repertory Theater and later toured as a singer and dancer with artists like Mitzi Gaynor and Robert Goulet, while also appearing in hit television series such as The Jeffersons, Happy Days, and Laverne and Shirley. Her work behind the scenes has been just as impactful. After touring Asia with her own musical group and running a Los Angeles recording studio, she transitioned to jazz publicity. As an executive at New York's Third Floor Media, she handled campaigns for top record labels and artists like Marian McPartland and Joshua Redman. She later launched her own consultancy, representing major artists and festivals, including the Montreal Jazz Festival. Now based in Toronto, Lesley continues to champion artists, write for leading arts publications, and share her deep passion for jazz.
I'm exhausted. I feel like one of those, Indian goddesses with the many arms, flipping a plate here, writing something there, singing a bit here.
It's funny. One of my favorite parts about doing this show is seeing people's reactions when they hear their own bio read. Everybody's like, oh, I've done some things.
You don't really, because luckily these things are all occurred over a rather lengthy period of time because I'm so bloody old. And that is true. In fact,
wise. Let's go with the word wise.
That's part of it. I went to the doctor the other day because I felt so, arthritic and achy, and doctor examines me thoroughly. And she says, well, you don't have arthritis. You just have premature rigor mortis. I'm also a graduate of Second City. I forgot to tell you that.
Well, you have had such a multifaceted career. Actor, singer, dancer, comedian, journalist, publicist, producer. It's a lot of things. So for those who are meeting you for the first time today, do you want to share a little bit about your journey in the biz and how you got where you are today?
Oh, well, as I said, these things happened gradually, but coming from a family in the entertainment business, and it goes back generations. My grandfather directed opera. I mean, it goes way back. Yeah. So we always kind of had that going on, whether it was in Ireland or here or wherever. So it was an expectation. Like, my father didn't think there was any use going to university or college. I mean, I did that on my own, partly because I was so young and too young to get an apartment. But anyway, he just thought, you go to the school of life. If you're learning to be a musician, you go out and jam, you do gigs, you do that. That was his philosophy. And but there was some pressure at home to be entertaining. You know, I can honestly say we had a thing at the dinner table, especially when we had dinner at our grandparents' house every Sunday. We had to write a joke. We had to write a joke or a poem or something like that. And it was mandatory. And if you didn't make your family laugh, then, you know, that was not good. You know, that was so, you know, I remember my dear brother, my late brother, his little initial joke was, the first one I think he ever told was, why does the faucet go drip, drip, drip? Because it can't go, you know, so that was the joke of a 4-year-old.
Makes me laugh.
It still works. It still works. And my dad would sit there and go, that's funny. That's really fun. You know how it's like kind of like Lauren Michaels, you know, people who are really into comedy, it's like they're laughed out.
Yeah, it's just analytical. It's just
it's in the analytical part of the brain. So, you know, that was the opening, you know, salvo. And I was so blessed to be a kid growing up in New York when I was a kid growing up in New York. And my dad, being a busy musician, he took me to a lot of the Broadway shows that he played in the pit orchestras for. And I mean, imagine, you know, you're sitting on the piano player, and you're watching a Broadway show from 2 feet away. How could you not fall in love and say, I have to do that? I have to do that.
Absolutely.
So there was the predisposition, and also, you know, you know, I did my very best to study, and I studied ballet and all kinds of dance and whenever I could. But a lot of this had to be financed by yours truly.
Yeah.
But I'm not complaining about that, because that was how important it was to me.
Yeah.
I think, so at a certain point, I guess I was in my I guess I was tweeny. I was a tween. And my dad, Gordon Whitey Mitchell, decided that, he didn't want to work in the pit orchestra. He had an epiphany. He was looking around at all the old dudes, and they were they're making the same bread that he was. Their skin is gray, and they're living out in New Jersey. And, you know, so he said that he felt that he wanted to move to Los Angeles and be a writer. And he had some huge encouragement from Lenny Bruce, because my dad was always contributing to mostly jazz publications like Downbeat. Yeah. And he wrote a very funny story. I think it was my first 100 years in the club date business or something like that. So Lenny Bruce had read that and wrote a note to my dad and encouraged him. And then his brother, my uncle Red Mitchell, was already in Los Angeles. He was one of those West Coast sound guys. Yeah. He was very much hooked into that tradition and that type of playing that was, of course, you know, very cutting edge in its day. So Red was out there. Anyway, so Dad, you know, ripped us out of our, you know, I never wanted to leave New York. I was horrified, but what can you do? Yeah. And I had an ominous feeling, though. I had a feeling that something bad was really going to happen. And I'd learned by that time already to pay attention to my feelings. Yes. You know, but there was no choice when you were that young kid. So we got out there, and my dad was working as a musician, but within about 3 months, he sold his first script to Get Smart. Oh, wow. And that propelled everything. Yeah. Everything. Of course, not long after that, my mother started stooping this guy. Fred the Dud, I called him. And before you knew it, my dad was kicked out, and he had nothing but his car and his golf clubs and his tuxedo. And, you know, that was it. So negotiating a divorce in a new place. And these were some difficult times, but luckily my salvation was always theater. I should really say more specifically musical theater. Yeah. And so at the Children's Repertory Theater, at Sherman Oaks Children's Repertory Theater, I joined, I think I was in grade 7. I was very young, and Melanie Griffith was there with me. And that really, we had these little musicals, and we performed them in repertory, and we did all that. So there you go. By the age of 16, after working in every community theater I could and doing everything that I possibly could. I had a scholarship to attend the Black Hills Playhouse, which was a really highly recognized summer stock theater, but also attached to a university. So I had finished school, 2 years early? I was 16, something like that. So, what was I going to do? So I left home at 16 and I went to work at the Black Hills Playhouse, and I never went back home.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it worked out. My mother was very unstable.
Yeah.
It was, I think now what we know about, forgive me for being so personal, but what we know about sexual abuse now, my poor mother was relentlessly abused by her father. And so she had mental health issues.
Yeah.
In fact, to the day she died, she couldn't even, she remembered, she still had memory blackouts, just blackouts.
Yeah.
She didn't really remember what had occurred. The only reason I'm completely positively sure that it did occur, because the same, fetid old dude, molested both myself and my brother.
Yeah.
So, but my poor mom, what she carried inside of her, it's a miracle that she wasn't completely hospitalized, but she had good coping mechanisms, and she was very smart and very beautiful, and she made that work for her. Yeah. So,
yeah,
she did.
That's a big environment to come up through.
It is, but everything has another side.
Yeah.
And what we didn't mention, in addition to, singing and PR, for about 20 years, I've been working really actively in mental health care. I'm a board certified clinical master hypnotherapist, which is kind of like my day gig, which allows me to not have to do stupid music gigs.
Yeah.
Or work for that, and I've done a lot of stupid gigs. Oh my God. Done a lot. I was even on a gig where the band leader just actually died on the bandstand.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It was Hal Bregman.
That is not funny.
Hal Bregman.
Sorry.
No, it was. Believe me, he was a very difficult dude. Nobody was crying any tears over that. So he was standing right in front of me with his shark skin suit and his full and his not general nastiness, and he said, "Okay, we're gonna play Witchcraft in E or something," and he, boom, out, gone. Hal Bregman.
I'm sorry, I can't stop laughing.
No, well, it has a humor. It has a humorous element to it. It really, really does.
I don't mean to be rude, but
there's a lot of funny things involving death and jazz. There really are. There really are a lot of funny things. Now, my late brother, told me that when he worked on, as we say, the bucket, when he worked for the cruise ships, they would always wager which of the old folks was going to die first. They had a pool, not a football pool, not a soccer pool, not a hurling pool, a death pool. And so they would wager. And my brother did tell me there was another occasion where they were playing, I guess, bombastically, I don't know how, some dance music or whatever. And this old dude couldn't sleep, and he came down the stairs in his bathrobe to yell at them, and he dropped dead on the dance floor. So these things do happen. Death and jazz. Intertwined.
Death and jazz. We might just have the name of our episode right there, Lesley.
I think we should. I think that's a good idea. There are a lot of, speaking of weird gigs though, when I was in LA just trying to be a singer, I had some strange gigs and some strange places. And I also, I worked extensively in East LA because I speak Spanish, and I sang with the Mexican bands. Yeah. And, some of those situations were pretty gnarly. Yeah. They used to have a club in East LA called the International Club. And there wasn't much that was international about it, but it was a huge, as we say, like a banquet hall for weddings. Yeah. And it was all Latino. It was the whole Mexican series thing with gangs and the whole deal. And there was always a fight. There were always weapons. It was always some kind of horrible thing. But, you know, from every experience you have, um, you can then develop or obtain compassion
Absolutely.
for whatever anyone else is going through.
Yeah.
And that compassion can be used in your art
Mhm.
in every way, whatever, you know, art that
Mhm.
is. It's amazing how once you get the overview, I mean, I feel very at peace with
Yeah.
my past. I don't have,
Yeah.
and some really horrible things have happened too.
Yeah.
I was robbed at gunpoint a couple of
Oh,
times. Once
more
going-
than once.
More than once. Once going to the Wilshire Hyatt Hotel in Los Angeles,
Yeah.
and it was Christmas Eve. I remember this because I had gifts for all the guys in the band in my
Yeah.
car, and I was driving along with an ex-blister, you know, and he was a real piece of work. So this man was so cheap that he wouldn't, on Christmas Eve with me carrying a bunch of packages, he wouldn't park in the hotel parking. And I kind of noticed there's like a family vehicle sort of following us, but I'm not twigged out because
Yeah.
it just looks like it was probably like, it was like a station wagon. It was, you know, it was kind of cars you don't see anymore. So we pulled into this obscure parking lot.
Mhm.
And as soon as we did, out of that family vehicle, it was like the clowns at the circus. They had
Oh.
like 10 guys in there, all with guns. Everybody's got guns. And they were wearing like their little
Half masks.
their little kerchiefs, their little
Yeah.
there's a word for what that is.
Bandana.
Bandanas.
Yeah.
In their color. And they made us lie on the I thought that was it. I really did, because those guys were high as bats. I mean, cocaine had not yet gripped the business
Yeah.
in the way that it did, say, 6 months from then.
Yeah.
But those guys, it wasn't heroin. Believe me,
Yeah.
it was some
Yeah,
kind of smoking of cocaine, which would have been shocking to anybody then. But so and then the idiot X, after we lay down the parking lot, they take all my stuff, my wedding, everything. And so then the idiot X stands up and starts yelling some random stuff at them.
No.
And so they shoot a couple shots at us, they miss, and they're gone. And it was Christmas Eve.
Oh my God.
Now here is the part that is so wonderful about the story.
Okay.
Now you have to think back to a time, and young people will not be able to conceive of this.
Mm.
There were not really many ATMs.
Right.
We didn't have, if you didn't get cash out of the bank physically on the weekend
Yeah.
through a teller,
Like, I don't think ATMs were a thing until the 80s.
I think so. And this was before that.
Yes.
So at any rate, you know, this was Christmas, so we had no money.
Yeah.
And so we went on a break. I think I sang the Christmas song by Mel Torme, and I'm crying and the tears are coming and I'm singing Merry Christmas to you. And then I get off the stage. And when we came back from the break for more of our shenanigans, somebody had left $300 for us on the keyboard. Now, $300 doesn't sound like much. It sounds like 2 dinners in Vancouver. But then that was like $1,000.
Yeah. That's an enormous tip.
It was an enormous amount of money. And I just couldn't, but that was humanity as I prefer to think of it.
Yeah.
Not those lost kids.
Yeah.
Those lost boys who they're probably all dead by now.
Yeah.
And living in the gang lifestyle. But with LA, it's such a veneer kind of place. You know,
Mhm.
you've got the beautiful palm trees, but it's important to remember that they're infested with rats.
Mm.
And that's a great metaphor for what that city is really like when you are living there.
Mm.
And during the late 70s and the 80s, it was a very plastic time.
Yeah.
It's like I wonder, like, why didn't my acting career ever, you know, excel exponentially? I mean, I had an agent, I had great pictures, I was in the right place at the right time, I was a union member, I'd done this, that, and that.
Mm-hmm.
But I would have been then a kind of an unusual ingenue, even though I was, you know, younger and more alluring. But it was later that some of these gals like Renee Zellweger and some of these more unusual actresses, more interesting actresses, For me, I was reading with stuff opposite the Landers sisters,
Yeah.
you know, and I wasn't about to get a boob job. I did get my nose fixed, but that was because of the blockage up there. Nothing to
Yes.
do with the cosmetic issues at hand.
So here on the Vocal Lab, we like to sort of look through the lens of what I know now that I wish I'd known then.
Oh, wow.
So looking back, what do you wish that you had known when you were first starting out?
To write and control my own material,
Mm-hmm.
whether it was musical, whether I was writing with a partner, or or even if I was producing something at my studio, to control the creative output
Yeah.
and not turn it over to some man.
Uh-huh.
You know, there were
Very male-dominated industry.
And the sleazy dudes, and just about everything you hear is true, you know, of the kind of things that went on. But it wouldn't be too long after that there was a bit of a shift, and other guys came in, and the music business, and then we had groups like Fleetwood Mac being given millions of dollars. Rumors, that's right. I was thinking of their follow-up, Tusk.
Yeah.
With the Los Angeles, the LA marching band,
Yeah.
you know, anyway. But I think it's what is so wonderful today. It's entirely possible to control your material and to decide how it's going to go, where it's going to go. And those things were just impossibilities back in the day, or they seemed impossibilities. The record labels were running everything.
Yeah.
African-American artists were being cheated and had been cheated horrifically. Women were being cheated. Female artists were being cheated. And, you know, like what would happen, maybe many people don't really probably realize that, but the only way you could get a record made would be to convince somebody, and sometimes in a smaller label, that they should invest in your record. Now, if you get the money and you make the record and you even do it kind of on budget, what happens after that is all of your expenses in promoting the record were billed back to you.
Right.
So it was possible to have a hit record
and owe money
and be bankrupt.
Yeah.
And owe money. And that was the usual kind of situation that artists of the late 60s and 70s would find themselves in. Even artists like Janis Joplin, you know, who didn't own any of her stuff. I don't think she owned any of her publishing. And this is another area with which, you know, you and your family, with the kind of pop successes and other successes that you've all had, publishing is everything.
Yeah.
Don't sell your publishing.
Yeah.
And also another thing is I would not take any non-union jobs. And what started to happen more into the 80s is the backs of the unions were broken all over the place. The musicians union especially.
Yeah.
And it was a free-for-all in the studios. And it wasn't unusual to be called to come in and do some Bee Gees stuff or what have you. And your payment was, you know, a tamale of cocaine. You know, that was not unusual. And everybody thought, well, you know, it's not addictive. You'll stay thin. You've got lots of energy. I mean, everything that, you know, it wasn't until later that all of the repercussions of that came. And then there were things where for instance, I was talking about this yesterday to a clinic, but when it started to evolve that artists could no longer read music. Yeah. When that was a common thing. Like, you know, Doris Day read music. I mean, when artists could no longer read music, they couldn't learn tunes. And so there was a guy named Brian Elliott who produced or found a lot of material for Madonna, particularly in her early career. And because I could kind of sound like her, and my sister's even better at it. My sister's like a impressionist. She can do anybody. Yeah. But they didn't like that as much. They wanted somebody who kind of sounded like, you know. So you had to walk that fine line. Yeah. You know, and sing it in whatever weird key works with the at that time, the 5-note range that she had. So one of those tunes, one of many that I went in and sang guide tracks for, was Papa Don't Preach.
Really?
Yes. And I swear to this day that my vocals are still on that track, that they never removed them. And that happened all the time.
Yeah.
And remember those, large, voluptuous African-American women who saying, it's raining men.
Yeah.
At first, they weren't going to let them be seen. That was the whole idea. They were going to get skinny girls.
Yeah.
Who looked like they just walked out of Auschwitz, right? They were going to get these skinny girls to do the tour or whatever.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, that has happened several times throughout music history, that there would be no Milli Vanilli without.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And what was it? Was it Groove is in the Heart?
Delight.
And it was a completely different person that they showed in the video, right?
Completely different person.
And she's the one that's saying, I couldn't dance for nothing.
Yeah, we think. Yeah. But I haven't seen much of a stellar career emanating after that one tune. She just looked like she dressed like a drag queen, and it was very provocative at that time, Delight. But so, yes, I think it would be about learning to run my artistic career like a business.
Yes.
I think that everyone now.
Once more for the people in the back.
Yes, everyone now. Dr. Hypno says, run your career, your artistic career like a business.
Yeah.
And do it that way and make the decisions. And it's totally possible now. And the record labels are gone, and they brought it upon themselves.
Yeah.
Through greed.
Yeah.
They wouldn't get on board with the technology, and they wouldn't. And so they went bankrupt.
Yeah.
And now they're distribution companies. Really only, and you have smaller labels where the label owners are very involved.
Yeah.
And it's almost like it's gone back to a jazz thing, or like Stax Records or Norman Granz or somebody. It's almost in some ways become so much more personal.
Yeah.
I know there are people that have wonderful relationships with their labels.
Yeah.
And there are wonderful Canadian artists like Bryan Adams, who is so deeply involved, who has this magnificent studio right here, close to here.
Yeah, it's just
down the street. So, there are wonderful people who are in the record business, and it doesn't have to be a cheating, lying. And the good news is you can't lie about stuff going on the internet. Mm-hmm. Unless you're Elon Musk. But
we won't go down that rabbit hole, but I don't disagree with you.
No, we're not good. That's all. Unless you're talking about hackers or what have you. There's a record of every sale, and that was the thing, that there was so much money laundering, and you really and you really want to bleed some money, open a jazz club.
Yeah.
So it's but you can do your own thing. You can do it ethically. You can control it. You can have good people around you.
Yeah.
You can have everything that you want as an independent artist if you don't fall for the first, schlemiel who comes down the road offering to finance your demo.
And I think that the piece of that people have to understand is that it is, especially in this day and age, it's totally doable to do it independently, but it does mean that you have to learn some auxiliary skills, like how to run a business.
Well, yes.
Because that is not a default place for most artists.
No, it's not, which is why years ago at the University of Toronto, I was teaching a class about promoting yourself, PR, but I said, these kids need to have a business course for small artistic business owners.
Yeah.
That's really what they need.
Yeah.
And then, everything, the whole landscape will change for them when they begin to empower themselves and run their thing. Pay your taxes, do your thing, get your 95 number, or whatever the Canadian equivalent is of what I just said. You can do it.
Yeah.
You know, you can even learn how to do it online. You don't have to take a course.
Yeah.
There's a lot of help online, or you can take it some distance learning.
Yeah.
Or some musicians are just good at business.
Yes.
But not too many.
Not too many. It's not, and you're right. Like I know a handful who they really have those parallel skills, but I see so many young artists, and this is a pattern I've seen for a lot of years, so it's not new.
Right.
Who want somebody else to do that part of it for them. They don't want to be responsible for that. And I really try and impart the fact that it's really important.
I don't want to know. I got to write the music. You pay the taxes. That's where the problems. That's where the problem came in for Billy Joel.
Yeah.
I mean, it can happen at a very high level.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, trusting the wrong person and not being hands-on and not wanting to be.
And that doesn't mean you can't have people on your team,
Yeah.
but you have to know enough to be able to look at what they're doing and know whether it's right or wrong.
Yes. And
you have to be able to read a profit and loss statement and a balance sheet and like some basic businessy things.
All of that. And you can do that easily on your own when you're new with computer programs.
Yeah.
That will set up a little business for you. So there's nothing out of reach.
Yeah.
It just has to be desire. But, you know, to sustain your career over a very long time, you must run it like a small business.
Yeah.
So that's, in fact, you know, my husband, Terry Clarke, one of the really many admirable things about him is he has always run his business like that. I tend to think now that he's a lot more right brain, left brain than he gives himself credit for. But he has a couple of rules. He doesn't ever. Well, I'll put it this way: the person that asks him first gets him.
Yes.
He's not going to accept 5 gigs and take the one for the most money and send out subs. So there's a really high ethical quality of the way that he operates, which I think has been part of what has sustained him.
Yeah.
And just being able, you know, his dad was a free independent guy who was a real estate guy who knew about a lot of stuff. And Terry early on invested in property, which was a smart move. He was so blessed to have no bad habits, whereas we all had bad habits in my family. Everybody had bad habits, you know, that those genes were highly active in my family, but he was blessed not to have that. Yeah. So, and that's the way to be. You don't need to be getting high in an unreasonable way.
Yeah.
Because life isn't that bad.
Yeah.
It gets bad if you are effing up and not taking care of your responsibilities or being that. And that's another thing, because he was always a straight as an arrow guy. The performances on the bandstand are consistent.
Yes.
That's what you want people to say, oh, give me that guy or that girl, because I know from their reputation, they're going to come on the bandstand and do what they're paid to do and do it well and be easy to get along with.
It is that. So it is partly the musical consistency, but that is absolutely not the whole thing. The other part is are they going to show up on time? Are they going to be late to downbeat? Are they going to know what they're doing coming in? Or are they going to come in not knowing the charts or the tunes or however we're learning them? Or like all of those pieces, you build a consistent reputation. And guess what? The music industry is a small industry, and no matter where you live, that's a small town. When it comes to the music industry, New York is
a small town.
Exactly.
We always say that. I can attest to that. Yeah. Yeah.
So your reputation, you build a reputation quickly, and then it precedes you wherever you go. So build the right reputation.
That's right. And there's another thing that I would do better if I could. I have a strange kind of dyslexia. It's not alphabetic. It's numerical dyslexia. You're kidding me.
My oldest daughter. Yeah.
So you know what happens.
I can't remember the name of it, but there is a name for it.
It's numeric dyslexia. There is another name, but yeah, that's essentially what it is. So for me, numbers move around and they change places. And if I'm going to go to even a street number, I have to look at my phone 25 times to be able to keep it in my head. Now that was not recognized when I was young, but it extremely affected my ability to read music. Because music is essentially math. And
not necessarily complicated math, but it is math.
It is math. And I think that there probably are ways to teach people with my issue how to read music better and more efficiently and multiple staffs and all that kind of stuff. So, I went at my singing career always feeling like, not even a second class citizen, a third class citizen. And the guys in my band knew that was my Achilles heel and were always putting me down because I couldn't read music well. But so I would look for someone to help me with that.
Yeah.
And really begin to understand theory. Because when I owned my recording studio in LA, I arranged all the vocals for Hanna-Barbera cartoons.
Yeah.
Again, a non-union situation.
Yeah.
Everybody was non-union, which is shameful. But the way I had to do it, God, I had a little early 4-track home studio. And because I couldn't write it out, I would
sing all
place
the parts.
key. I can play some pianos.
Yeah.
I had to sing the parts into the recording and create how I thought it should sound.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't write it and say, you 4 guys, will you just sing this for me? And I want to hear if the placement is right, if we need to.
Yeah.
I couldn't do that. So it's extremely time consuming and caused me a lot of shame. Yeah. And in my family, can you imagine? My brother's reading fly specks and playing with everybody. My dad, my Uncle Red, everybody could read anything. And I was unable to do it. I was so dyslexic in that way that I think when you first learn long division, maybe grade 4, something like that, I had to, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. So I thought, well, I figured out that if I converted all of the numbers to Roman numerals, I would not have the problem.
Interesting.
So I had, VX, blah, blah. So I had and I was very fast with that. So I had my whole problem written. And of course the teacher comes over and says, what in bloody hell are you doing? That's not the assignment. And I just stuttered. I couldn't explain what was wrong because there was no name for it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
God, I don't think I've ever talked about that publicly in my whole life. You're like, Baba Wawa. I'll be crying next.
Somebody get the tissues. A lot of our listeners and performers can relate to this, but you balanced multiple disciplines.
Yeah.
What was it like juggling acting, singing, dancing in the early stages of your career?
Well, I would have to say that my career as a girl in the chorus and in a musical was very short-lived because I had terrible knee injuries. And we didn't really know how to take care of ourselves in those days. Now my daughter with the dance troupe she's in, they travel with like 2 chiropractors and a massage therapist.
It's an entirely different world now.
I can't even believe it.
Yeah.
So it was great. But so that the dancing part was really over.
Yeah.
Pretty early on. And it was always difficult getting consistent acting work in Los Angeles. Also, I lived through some big strikes that went on for months and months. There were all kinds of things that just stopped production. And so I couldn't support myself as an actor. I could not. That just nobody could unless it was an unusual thing. So that's when I really started singing exclusively professionally.
Yeah.
Out of necessity. Not really so much out of love for singing.
Interesting.
And, but within singing, it was always about jazz, but I didn't get a chance to do very much of it in most of my career. Like usually I had a pop band. But usually for the first set, I could, squeeze in.
Yeah.
And then remember, we talked about Linda Ronstadt, I think,
Yes.
recently, about how she resuscitated an interest in standards with her 2 albums.
The Linda Ronstadt with the Nelson Riddle Orchestra, where she's like Bewitched and those tunes. And I remember having that, which I just like took it from my parents' record collection because I didn't know who Linda Ronstadt was, but they certainly did.
They did. Yeah.
But I had that, and I played it on repeat as an early teenager, and that was was my probably introduction to jazz.
Well, for so many people, and I got a chance to slip in a lot of that great material. Harry Nielsen, A Touch of Schmielsen in the Night, all standards. So I was able to get enough of that kind of stuff into my show, if you will, so that it was satisfying, but it was very refreshing when I just decided I'm not going to do this anymore.
Yeah.
And I wanted a home.
Yeah.
I wanted a home. I wanted a stable relationship. I wanted to, I was a cancer survivor. I didn't know if I could have children, but as it turned out, I did. So I wanted that because deep down, I'm a very sort of middle class, straight ahead girl. And, there's no shame in that.
No.
So I wanted those things, and there was no way to have them with, when you talk about balancing, I couldn't do it on the road. I couldn't live on the road.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it. I did it for like 10 years straight.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was in Japan.
Yeah.
And that was a whole nother, box of sushi over there. It really was, because when I first went to Japan, it was the late 70s and I think 1978. And I was the leader of the band.
Yeah.
But the horrific ex had to pretend to be the leader because they wouldn't accept a female leader.
Oh,
so
wow.
There were all kinds of wild things.
Yeah.
And one trip around that time, I was working at the Latin Quarter. They had one in Japan. And when we got over there, I had one guy who had never been there before. Everybody else was hip. And I said, look, guys, if you need any money, if you need anything, you ask me, but whatever you do, don't steal. This is a culture where there is no stealing. I know that's hard to believe, but that's the way it is. So I gave this big talk, big song and dance. So my guitar player one night, he is leaving the gig and he sees a car in the parking lot and there's a big bag of M&Ms in the car. So he just opens the car and takes them and goes on his merry way. Well, of course they had footage.
Of course.
They had cameras everywhere. So it's like, I think it was 3 a.m. There's a knock on the door. And I think, oh my God, what could that possibly be? I get up in my stolen yukata from the hotel next door. Sorry about that. But I get up and I open the door and it is a bunch of Japanese gangsters. The Yakuza guys with the pinky cut off,
Oh.
Yeah, Yakuza guy. And they explained that my employee, because now they knew I had signed the contract, so I was the head. On that trip, I was the head dude.
Yeah.
So now they knew who it was, and I had to go with them right that minute. I couldn't even get dressed. I went with them, and they drove me around to 5 or 6 Yakuza bosses, what we would call now godfathers, or heads of the 5 family.
Yeah.
Ironically, it was like 5 or 6 guys.
Yeah.
I had to go inside. I had to go in and apologize to them.
Wow.
I was scared.
Yeah.
I was a little bit scared.
I can see.
Yeah.
Why?
But again, more adventure.
Yeah.
Someday I'm going to write that into something. Yeah. I don't think that's ever happened to any other singer that I know. Or somebody stole some M&Ms and they ended up in front of a Yakuza boss.
It does kind of sound like a sitcom.
Doesn't it though? Doesn't it? It's all material. As Nora Ephron's mother used to tell her, it's all copy.
Yeah.
It's all there for me to use. So there have been a lot of little strange adventures like that.
Yeah.
But I wanted to have a life where I could work in town and sing at a jazz club and do my writing and all my other things and act when the acting came up.
Yeah.
And it was an idealized thing that just in Los Angeles at that time, it just was not possible.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have enough jazz clubs.
Mm-hmm.
We had like 2, where someone like me who wasn't a named person could work. And it was getting to this weird pay to play area.
Yeah.
And, everything was changing radically. So
Yeah.
After the unfortunate marriage broke up, I relocated to New York City, which was the best thing I could have done. So I was working for I got a job at a publishing company. Soon I was Stephen King's publicist.
Mm-hmm.
So the PR thing became the day job, which enabled me to read for acting jobs.
Yeah.
And enabled me to sing in jazz clubs or in jazz situations, even with some jazz groups.
Yeah.
And I had the kind of peace and excitement at the same time. It was a wonderful combination because the energy in New York, I think I don't know if it's ADD. I think I need a lot of stimulation.
Yeah.
And living in Los Angeles was just not it. And you got to drive everywhere.
Yeah.
It's like that bit in Saturday Night Live, the Californians. And then I took the cut off to the 405, and then I went on the 10 freeway, the Santa Monica freeway, because you got to do that now, Lisa, because you just can't get there in the 134. Yeah, that's all you talk about, right?
Yeah.
That's all you talk about is how to get from one place to another.
But I think that that's a really valid point. I think when people, especially younger sort of emerging artists, which is the bulk of our audience, when you're at that stage, I think it's really common to view it as an all or nothing choice.
Yeah.
You are going to go whole hog into this and baby, I'm going to be a star.
That's right.
Or it's not good enough and I'm not going to do it.
That's right.
I don't mean that that's what it is. I mean, that's our thinking around it often.
It's an all, these young people have an all, I'm going straight to the top, baby. Yeah. They have an all or nothing idea. And we talked about this earlier. The entertainment business or the arts, it's a roller coaster.
Yeah.
It's a roller coaster for everyone. And for me and for many people, I did not feel more creative when I was having a tough time. That did not spur on my creativity. That only added to my...
Oh, you didn't have depression creativity.
No, I didn't. I had no depression creativity.
I say that lightly as someone who does have depression creativity.
Some people do. In fact, lots of writers do. Lots of writers have to put themselves... I mean, Edgar Allan Poe had to use, morphine to put himself into depression to be able to work. So everybody has their own thing. If you can do that, and it's probably a wonderful way to pull yourself out when your creative spurt is over. Is probably your body has found a way to create a hyperfocus.
Yeah.
Would be my guess.
Yeah.
By shutting down the stuff that's distracting.
I can understand
something like that. I think it's something that you are doing or your body is aware to do to help heighten your creative process.
Certainly possible.
Yeah, that's what I think.
But I think holding that perspective of I could do something that's not producing the art, but that is related to the producing the art,
very much,
but
so.
that I love doing.
Oh, yes.
That can allow me to then make my art.
Yep.
That perspective of those being a both and rather than an either or.
Yes.
I think is a really important one to adopt, especially in this day and age, because very few people, unless you have family support or you're independently wealthy or, you have some sort of sponsorship.
Yeah.
It's very hard at an early stage of your career to be all or nothing because
it's not realistic.
We got to eat.
It's not realistic. And I think it's important to do something else and learn to balance it.
Yes.
I think it's important to be a waiter or a bartender and balance it. There's something about that means you can then be on your own and you can grow up and you can have other experiences that will add to your art. Because young people, they think they know everything, right? They think they know everything, and maybe they've had their
Definitely a stage of development.
It is a stage, and maybe they've had their heart broken once, but certainly they need a larger emotion. You need a large emotional vocabulary.
Yes.
To be an artist of any kind. And so I think all those experiences are good. I would have to say that's exactly what I did with PR, with publicity.
Mm-hmm.
I was right close there. And not only was I close to it, but then I was doing exclusively jazz.
Yeah.
And it was at the highest level. I had all of Warner Brothers jazz that I was handling.
Yeah.
And some genius people like Brad Meldau and also some venerable people, as you mentioned, like Marion McPartland and Helen Merrill and Mark Murphy. And, I had a lot of venerable people too. And I was the publicist for the Village Vanguard.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine?
Mm-hmm.
So I had found something that was so close. And I was very satisfied by it for a long time. What started to happen is I just had a kind of a personal epiphany when I thought, well, here I am doing PR, and it was especially after we moved to Toronto from New York.
Yeah.
Because and when the record labels collapsed, nobody had a deal, and they're all sending me their individual record. They're in the basement, and it was just, and I would think, oh my God, if I take this on, I'm going to be blowing up your ego for 3 months, and then nothing. And for some people, that was very destructive. They had a kind of a postpartum depression. So in a way, I was doing more harm than I was doing good, because I could put all my resources behind him. And at that time, we had a lot of television. There was a lot of stuff I could do. All the papers had jazz reviewers. None do now.
Yeah.
So it was a different kind of thing. But I could get a whole lot of stuff going. And the person says, oh, I'm great. It's great. I'm going to my Ontario tour. I'm on my way. And then, and so I decided that, well, it's kind of interesting how I found doing hypnotherapy. And by the way, I also work with artists. I have a whole artist protocol. So I'm just as close to working with artists as I was then, except now in a completely positive way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I was really bummed out and just sickened by the PR situation in Toronto, especially. And I would hire people and they wouldn't get what they wanted and they'd blame me. It's blame the publicist became the game. Before you could blame the label. Now it was blame the publicist. And when it turned into blame the publicist, I said, F.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was in a quandary. And so again, my husband, Terry, he was very insightful. And he said, you know what, I'm going to send you to have a past life regression. Which is a deep hypnotic process. And I said, okay, great. I'd love to do that because I've got to, find out why I'm spinning my wheels, So I had the experience, which was wonderful and insightful. But what I took away from that experience was the knowledge that I could do that.
Yeah.
I could facilitate those experiences for people. And I felt like I'd done it before. It's really like I found the thing. So as quickly as I could, I found the Ontario Hypnosis Center. I got all the necessary training and credentials to put my shingle out. And I began working immediately. And it has been like that ever since.
I have done one of your past life regression workshops.
It's pretty trippy. It's amazing that you can.
It was very interesting.
It is
very interesting.
It is, and the fact that something like that can happen without any artificial chemicals, or there now everybody's microdosing LSD, but our brain chemistry is so magnificent, and we can. Manifest all kinds of things. We can put ourselves into an alpha state because all hypnosis is really self-hypnosis. I'm just a guide that knows how to talk to the subconscious mind. That's it. If you don't want to do it, it won't happen. But musicians tend to be very open and sensitive. So it's unusual when I can't get a musician or artistic person into a vulnerable state. If I can't do it, then I usually know that I'm dealing with someone who has a lot of fear.
Yeah.
A lot of fear, a lot of ego, a lot of posturing, and a lot of fear. Anyway, so I recommend being independent and getting a little gig, doesn't matter what it is, you're going to learn from it. I delivered singing and tap dancing telegrams. I mean,
My brother did singing telegrams
God, did he really?
before he was,
bless his heart.
you know,
Before he
was famous.
Before he was the big dude that he is now.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, I've had some incredible jobs. And even when I was at university, because there was no money for that,
Yeah.
I put myself through university by working all night in a state mental hospital. And I was a psychiatric aide and a psychiatric technician.
Mm-hmm.
So my compassion for mental health issues, and my knowledge about what I've seen and learned firsthand is pretty extensive. So there's a big part of me that's real medical.
Yeah.
You know, there's always I didn't discover it until I was in my 20s, but when I think about it, I always volunteered at the hospital. I was always like a candy striper, and I did this. So it had to always be there, but for a while it was completely obliterated by my desire to be on stage.
Yeah. It's funny. I have said so many times, if I was going to go back and do it all again, and not go into the arts, if I was going to make a different choice that didn't take me in that direction, I would have become a doctor.
Yeah.
Whether that's an MD or a naturopath, I don't know, but I would have been something in that direction for sure.
Yeah.
I think it's fascinating.
There's a big connection between medicine and jazz.
Yeah.
There are an awful lot of jazz musicians that are psychiatrists or medical doctors or cardiologists. I mean, we know a whole slew of them. Maybe they don't do it at a big, high professional level, but they're doing it and loving it.
Yeah.
And there seems to be an attraction between people who are inclined towards medical interests and music, particularly jazz.
Interesting.
Yeah. I don't know what it is. Maybe that it's so opposite from the way the studies are in a medical career, or the demands that are on you. Maybe it's the freedom of it.
Yeah.
That could be an element. I'm not sure.
Freedom, creativity. I mean, I think because jazz as a genre it takes creativity, whether you're creating in the pop genre or the country or rock or whatever, or in jazz, the initial creation takes creativity, no matter what.
That's right.
What's different is that in pop music, you play it the same way every time.
That's right.
In jazz music, you play it differently every time.
That's right.
So it's an ever evolving, constant creativity.
That's right.
Instead of a fits and spurts.
Absolutely. And that has a whole different impact on the human psyche. And then I think there's also communicative thing, because jazz musicians communicate psychically.
Yeah.
They may not say that they do, but they do, with just a raise of an eyebrow or even a thought.
Yeah.
You know, so I think many doctors can be very isolated people. They're seeing one patient, patient, don't ever get enough time to really do it.
Yeah.
And then go home to their insular life. I don't think it's really a very happy kind of social thing, or it can be not exactly what I wanted to say. I think the things that go on in the head of the jazz musician, with the communication and the freedom and the ever changing and the non-quantum type of flow state is so appealing to someone who has to live in such an analytical world.
Yes, yes.
That's what I meant to say.
And you're absolutely right. It is a flow state.
And you can get it. I mean, you can get it, I suppose, in any type of music, but
I've definitely experienced it in other genres as
can.
well. So it's reachable. I think
That's
it's maybe
right.
more prevalent or more common in jazz.
I think so because of the just what it is, what it does to the brain chemistry. And I know there are a lot of studies about that now. I think they put sting in an MRI tube. There are certain musics that affect different parts of the brain. Classical music affects another part of the brain from jazz, and rock another altogether, and different things. And this is what surprised me from that sting exploration. different things happen in the brain when one is composing
Then listening or
than
playing.
listening.
Ah,
Yeah.
interesting.
And you would think, well, it's got to be the same because you're thinking a melody. And that's what Sting couldn't get. He said, I don't understand it. I'm thinking a melody in my head. I'm hearing it.
Yeah.
Why is that different from me not doing that and just listening to the music? But it is.
Huh. Fascinating.
We know we're in the era of the real time mapping of the brain.
Yeah.
And this is just, we're on the cusp. My feeling is that in the future, we are going to be able to manage a lot of mental health issues by the regulation of our own brain chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
That is really my feeling because we're already using techniques like EMDR in the treatment of PTSD. And I do a lot of that kind of work.
Mm-hmm.
I work with a lot of frontline responders and people who've seen the worst things you can imagine. And EMDR is like a revolution in how it works. And it just has to do with eye movement and moving stuff around from one hemisphere to the other and releasing different chemicals. And that's what it is. And I think that we're going to find ways to do that kind of thing for all kinds of mental health issues.
Yeah. I'll tell you, I find it quite fascinating. A couple of people close to me in the last year, 2 years have been doing neurofeedback.
Biofeedback or neurofeedback?
Neurofeedback specifically. So I haven't been there, but my understanding is that they attach something somewhere on their heads.
Yeah.
And then they watch a movie on TV, whatever movie they want, but the picture gets smaller and bigger and goes away and comes close and the sound does it. And it's all laying new neural pathways.
Right.
And for a personality that does not do well in traditional talk therapy,
yes,
it has been an excellent alternative. And I have seen differences in the behavior afterwards, but it's the same kind of thing that I know it's entirely different than EMDR. I've had EMDR too, but
it's not.
But it's resetting things
it's
in there.
not. It's resetting. All I'm saying is I think we have the possibility to reset stuff with our own brain chemistry a lot of the time, but we have to find therapies and modalities for people who, first of all, cannot tolerate psychotropic medication. And, a large percentage of the people that are taking SSRIs are not getting any result. But that's neither here nor there. But what's healthy for the body, I think, is always to not take anything.
I think that's always
that's the goal.
It wants to be the first choice.
Yeah, that would be the first choice. But luckily, we have other options. But there are people who don't do well with talk therapy.
Yeah.
Where they can just go on and on and on and on. Eventually, the therapist has to release them because there's no progress being made.
Well, I think that can happen where it's not actually constructive. It's just complaining, really.
Oh, yeah.
But I think the flip side is true, too, where there are people who there is so much shame or fear or whatever that blocks that they can't open up enough for talk therapy.
Shame and fear.
Be any kind of effective.
Yes, it just, you can't get in.
Yeah.
No matter how relaxed you get them. Even if I use hypnosis as well, you cannot get in if someone is overwhelmed with shame and fear. That's just a fact.
Yeah.
You can't, that's not the therapy for those people.
Yeah.
And there are quite a few of them.
Yeah.
It's like therapy, as you said, talk therapy can become like addictive. It's like, look at Woody Allen. He was on the couch for, 60 years in Freudian therapy. And then he goes and shucks his daughter. Yeah. I mean, really, that doesn't say a whole lot.
No, it does
or
not.
The therapy path of,
that said, I would not be here today without talk therapy. So I'm also a big proponent of it, but it's different strokes, different folks.
That's right. And there's something for everyone.
Options.
There need to be lots of options, and hopefully, especially when we're dealing with kids.
Yeah.
With psychotropic medications can be very unpredictable. And I'm not anti. I'm just saying, wouldn't it be nice if before putting your kid on, Ritalin or whatever it was, if there was some other modality that was not going to involve a heavy duty chemical. To try.
More choices are always better for things like that.
With ADHD or ADD, Ritalin has been a miracle. And, my nephew I can't think what he takes now, but it's the one
There's
that's
Concerta, there's Vyvanse, there's
it's like Vyvanse. I think that's what he's saying.
Adderall.
And Adderall.
Yeah.
So for him, it's like the fog has lifted.
Yeah.
It's not like he doesn't get high. He doesn't get high at all
Yeah,
anyway.
no.
It's just the fog is lifted and he can focus. And since he has been properly medicated, he's he's an assistant to a top music editor.
Mm-hmm.
He's a musical guy and he's in the union. He has an incredible job, but he could never have done that without that medicinal help.
Yeah.
The talk therapy didn't work for him, but it has worked for me.
Mm-hmm.
It worked for me very dramatically when we went through, and some issues with our family, particularly when let's see, I'm not quite sure how to phrase this without being when our child that was born male discovered that they were transgender, and transitioned through the help of surgery, even plastic surgery, which was remarkable, into a female person, but in my mind, in my heart, had always been female. So I can't say that it was as much of a shock to me as it was to my husband, but we both had to have therapy, and we got it. And it was talk therapy, and it was incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
It was so helpful that it was like, for me, kind of almost like night and day about how I had been feeling. Well, look, I was taught in psychology that transgenderism was extreme body dysmorphia, that it was a mental illness.
That was the opinion for a long time.
It was. And we are now only really beginning to understand what we're even taught now. That Native peoples have always understood. They said two-spirited.
There's a lot of language for it in a lot of cultures for a lot of history.
There is. I mean,
it's not new.
It's not new. I think Thailand accepts 6 genders. 6.
I think the indigenous peoples here, it's something like that.
Something
5 or
like
6.
that.
It's definitely more than 3.
Yeah.
Or like there's degrees and I mean, as you know, our family went through that same process.
Yes.
And I think as a parent, it's hard because it wasn't a shock for me either. Yeah. My son had been living as a boy since, I mean, not officially, but like.
No, but I saw the pictures through the years, always choosing to dress with the caps. And
I always had a mohawk and always boy clothes and all that since a very, very young age. Yeah. So it surprised nobody when they came out. But that still, there was an adjustment period for me, even though it was not at all unexpected.
Yeah.
There was still an adjustment period for me, and it wasn't because I didn't support the change or anything. It had nothing to do with that. I was fully in support of it, but this had always been my daughter.
Yes.
And there was an adjustment period for me to change that in my brain to this is my son.
Yeah.
Including the language around it. And again, it wasn't because I wasn't willing to use it, but I had one pronoun in my mouth for 16, 18 years, whatever it was.
Yes.
And having to change that.
That was very challenging. And Isla, our daughter, was very understanding with that.
Yeah.
She would just, she would sometimes correct, but that was difficult. And I know that I felt on a certain level that my little boy was gone. Well, that wasn't really
there is
true.
A grief period.
I did go through. I think we both went through that, but it was my grief, not her grief,
right? Because
her grief was every day.
Yes,
her grief was every day being in a body that didn't represent her feeling, and that's body dysmorphia.
Yes,
hating what you have, knowing it's wrong.
Yeah,
because the joy that I see now in her, the joy and she had to, she's a professional dancer. She had to almost relearn to dance.
Yeah.
Because the surgery is quite profound,
yeah.
Although they've refined it fantastically. But it changes the way your body is as far as musculature is reduced. I mean, she had to hit that ballet class all summer, and she did.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, I had a child who went from a female body to a male body with hormones. And so that transition, there's added musculature.
Right.
There's added muscle bulk. There's that change goes in that direction.
That's
so
right.
all of a sudden, things like going to the gym and lifting weights became a lot more enjoyable because there was just this different musculature
there
to
was
work
a result.
with. Whereas you're talking about your child, it's the difference, and you're taking away some of that muscle
and
mass.
No more weightlifting, none of
Right.
that kind of thing. But you're absolutely right. It was a different. There was a different physicality, and she had to like relearn some things.
Yeah.
But the dancing is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And what they did, there are some lovely people who do, well, it's called feminization, but I'm sure they have masculinization surgery too.
Yeah.
So she went to Spain to a specific clinic, and what they did was astonishing.
Really?
They literally changed the shape of her face, and it's so natural and beautiful. And when someone goes through a male adolescence, they start getting a more of a defined brow.
Yeah.
They got rid of that. She had started having some male pattern baldness in the back.
Yeah.
They did a hair transplant. I mean, she had, but the result was, I've never seen anything so natural in my life.
Yeah.
And I've, a lot of my girlfriends have had a lot of stuff done.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to say, but none of it has been too good.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
And you can always tell.
Yeah.
But of course we're talking about a young person here.
Yeah.
This wasn't, someone my age trying to look 30. It wasn't that. This is what a joke. It wasn't that. It was, but anyway, just the and now, I'm just so, I don't want to talk about politics at all, but I'm just glad that she's in Europe.
Yes.
That's all I'm going to say. I'm glad that she's in Europe, and I'm glad that your son is here in Canada.
Yes.
And I think we have to really look to our children's safety, all of our children's
100%.
safety, as these horrible legislations are being presented before the American people. Now, bear in mind, nothing can really happen. Every state is going to resist. So these are frightening.
Hopefully.
These are frightening things that we've been hearing,
Mm-hmm.
but we can't give in to fear.
Fear is a tool.
Fear is the tool that he is using.
Mm-hmm.
So, and his henchmen. But for the time being, until that sorts out down there, my daughter isn't even renewing her U.S. passport.
Yeah.
Because probably, even though she's legally female, they will probably send it back as male.
Yes.
And that can't happen at the border. When
Right.
a beautiful blonde comes up, and presents Kyle Patrick
problematic
Clark's
immediately.
thing. It just doesn't work because she doesn't look anything like that person.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but God
well,
bless
and
her.
interestingly, like, I realized that because my child cannot safely travel in the U.S. right now, I find that I have no interest in traveling in the U.S.
That's
right now.
right.
I'm not interested in being in a place that my child cannot safely
That's right.
be.
That's right. That's right. I do have some family there, but my sister spends most of her time in Ireland now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like I have to go. And I feel exactly as you do.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of Canadians who don't even have children because of all this Michigas,
Yeah.
a lot of Canadians are canceling their Florida idols and their this and their that, and the places they go that are Las Vegas.
The airlines are talking about changing their flight schedules because
they're going to have
bookings are down so much.
They're going to have to, because, we're going to stand strong for,
what's right.
Love is love is love
Yes.
is love. That's what we're standing strong for. Anyway.
I'm going to circle us back to music here and that world.
All right.
What have you found to be the most useful things in your career in terms of networking, developing relationships that lead to opportunities, or just getting in the right rooms with the right people? Again, knowing that we're talking to an audience of emerging artists
Yes.
who need to develop those tools.
Well, I think, the emerging artists, first of all, do need to be seen.
Yeah.
And
Which is hard because there's no place to play.
I know. And this is a very tough thing, but there is also, new media, which we didn't have.
Yeah.
People who never set foot on a stage can have a huge following.
Yes.
And now most of the clubs, and I've heard that the clubs in Vancouver, this is what I've heard, they won't book you unless you have a certain amount of media
follower
following.
count. Yeah.
That is true. So, and
there's certainly some of that.
There's some of that, and we're seeing that in Toronto and certainly LA, everywhere. But there is, if there's not a live place to play, I would say, first of all, pick out the places where they play the kind of music that you love.
Yeah.
And if you are attracted to those places through the law of attraction, the right people are going to start to come in.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're a young comedian, where would you go? You'd sign up to do stand-up at the Improv or whatever. Yeah. And the guys that booked the Tonight Show came in all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you have to sort of use your energy to, through the law of attraction, bring those people to you, or allow yourself to be attracted to their environments. And then I think if you are a good person, a nice person, a consistent person, if you're not ego-based, if you're not a little whatever,
biznatch,
a little, yes, that will actually happen. You will find yourself in the right place and the right time, because there's a lot of luck in this business, in all of the business. There's a tremendous amount of luck. And sometimes, like I was talking about my acting career, sometimes when you have all the luck, for whatever reason, that wasn't met.
Right.
And it didn't happen. But there were reasons, I'm sure, but I don't think they were talent, because as a middle-aged actress, I work all the time. So it had to have been my non-traditional self. But don't worry about that.
Yeah.
Don't worry. It's a bigger field now. It's a huge field now. There are all kinds of people who look all kinds of ways. All kinds of ethnicities are welcomed. All kinds of cultural affiliations are welcomed. So there is a place for everybody.
Yeah.
There's room for everyone is what I kind of think.
Yeah.
I think it's an illusion that you think, oh, I can't have this success. I think there's room for everyone if it's meant for you. And if you proceed in an ethical way and you learn your stuff, you know your stuff, you don't get up at the Troubadour until you've got a song that is more than 251.
Yeah.
Right. So it can help, if these days, there aren't too many agents and they really aren't managers.
Yeah.
In the old days, there would have been managers who would have helped groom you, but they also would have taken half of your money.
Yeah.
So, but just be honest. Be honest about yourself and with yourself, and figure out what it is that brings you the joy and the excitement. And that path will open up. I really believe that. Yeah. I believe that you have always had a gift, not only as a musician, but a gift in doing just what you do now. In you're curious. You have an inquiring mind. You're curious about people. You know a lot about different things, and those are all really magnificent characteristics. And you have and you are expressing them in your own way.
Yeah, and
it's valid. And be truthful too. I mean, because I came from such a plasticky time. I don't think anybody ever got to see the real person at an audition.
Yeah.
It just, unless you were, Al Pacino or something,
Yeah.
I don't think that ever happened. It was just so plastic. Is she tall? Does she have big, what's? And it was all about that. Oh, another thing did happen to me that was a little discouraging. There is an actress named Diana Scarwid. Now, that may not be a name that you recognize right away because she's retired from acting, but she was in some big films. She was in Silkwood. She was in, she played Joan Crawford's daughter, Christina Crawford, in Mommy Dearest. She had some big Well, the unfortunate thing is we have an uncanny resemblance.
Mm-hmm.
Uncanny, especially at that time, to where I came in and oh no, she looks just like Dinah Scarwood. And I remember I went to see a movie with my friend Jim Jeremias, who wrote The Last Lost Boys, by the way. I went to see a movie with him. It was Mommy Dearest. And as soon as Diana Scarwood came on camera, he looked at me and he said, "Oh God, no." So that could have been an element. I don't know. Yeah. But oh God, no, it's all over for you. But no, it's never over.
No.
It's never over.
No.
But so law of attraction is big. Belief in yourself, releasing fear.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's good to have a bit of a F you attitude. Well, if you like me, fine. If you don't, okay. Don't try to force an association, I would say.
I think it's so interesting because hitting menopause, all my F's went out the window.
I know. You got to reframe now.
Yeah.
Reframe.
My need to please other people or do things for other people in that way has shifted enormously in this period of time.
Yes.
But what I find is that I am now extremely clear about what I do and what I don't do.
Yes.
And who are my people to work with and who are not my people to work with.
That's right.
And the interesting thing that I find is that the clearer I am about that, not just with myself, but actually communicating that and stop being wishy-washy and, oh, sure, okay, I'll work with you even though you're not really who I normally work with. The clearer I am, the more the right people show up at my,
that's right.
Loving
boundaries
Yeah.
is, and that again is incredibly important for a young performer because there's sleaze bags everywhere, and and this is not.
And I wish I'd known I wish I'd trusted
Yeah.
when I was younger. It's not that I didn't know, but I didn't trust myself enough to stand up for myself.
I get it. I have those feelings too.
Yeah.
And of course I was raised in a world where you could, you had a big skirt that went out like that and a Tony Home perm and women were subjugated to men all the time. So and I think my mother also maybe many mothers from that era taught their daughters to be manipulative. You can't get what you want from a man in an upright way because that's not how it works.
Right.
So you have to manipulate him with, sexuality or with a threat or with it, so this idea that it's okay to get it that way. It's all right because of what they do.
Yeah.
So we have to throw all that stuff out. All that has to go and it's going, but loving boundaries. I've had the same problem. And, Terry, my husband, has tried for years to get me to put them because he sees people coming in and taking advantage of me. And again, maybe being a child of divorce and feeling like I can't be lovable unless I take care of all this business. I don't know. It could have something to do with that. But
I don't know. My parents didn't divorce. They split up, but for a while, but not till I was already an adult. But I came out of them not divorcing with not dissimilar. I mean, not the manipulative part that was not passed along to me, but but just stuff that I don't know shows up in how I deal in professional circumstances, and that automatic impulse to default to typically a man's
yes, that's the knee-jerk
whatever.
thing. That's the knee-jerk thing that we have. Daddy has to be proud of me.
Yes,
that's and so
I still came out of a non-divorced home with that.
That's very true. And as I remember, your mom, your late mom, had to be one of the sweetest, loveliest people who ever, walked this earth. And I can't imagine her probably saying no to too many people.
No. That was not a strong word in her
I
vocabulary.
imagine that if somebody asked her to do something, she would have bent over backwards
Yeah.
to do it, even if it was terribly inconvenient.
Yeah.
I think that's just who she was. And that would have been hard for her
Yeah.
to tell people no, because she wanted to help people.
Yeah.
It wasn't ego-based, it's just who she was.
Yeah.
So, but we see examples of that, and it does make it hard.
Yeah.
So again, I would tell our especially that now having your boundaries in place will help you from getting in. It will save you from getting into any funky situations.
Yeah.
With any funky man.
Yeah.
You know, that's for sure. Because if some of my friends when we were younger and they were actresses and terrible things happened, and I'm not blaming them for what occurred.
No.
It was the man's fault, but it would, if their vibration had been different, if they had been able to say, no, I got to go, just no, I got to go. Not
Right.
for me. You're offering a part. Fine. Give it to somebody else. Not for me. I got to go. If they had been able to put that in place, maybe some of these terrible, traumatic events wouldn't have happened.
Well, I don't know, my personal experience, the traumatic events that happened to me is it usually wasn't in the moment where I needed to have that no boundary, because by then it was too late. It was that there were choices leading up to it where my gut was already saying no, but I still went to the thing, or I still did this, or that put me in a place where ultimately the gross thing happened.
Yeah.
So for me, it wasn't the last choice. It was all the choices leading up to it where I needed to have been more boundaried.
Well, absolutely.
And wasn't.
It is. I completely get that. I think maybe the worst thing that ever happened, and because I was pretty good. Not too much of this stuff did happen to me. And having traveled the world with a band, I knew how to be, I knew how to keep up my barriers.
Yeah.
Because I never had any adventures with any of the guys in my band. That was just not what was going to happen. And it was very easy for me. And I had been so close to my brother, I just extended them. They just became like brothers. Very easy for me to do that. But I had a girlfriend of mine who was an actress. Her name was Patty. She called me and she said, "Oh, well, they're casting this commercial in town, and what was weird is it was a Sunday. It didn't come through my agent. I don't think she had an agent. So she said, yeah, there's this guy in town. They're doing this commercial for, I think it was John Deere tractors or something like that. Really, I would have had to have driven a tractor. So she says, why don't you, I'll give you why don't you just go down and see this guy because he's going to cast this commercial." And I thought, I was feeling imperious and okay. And again, my desire to work and to have that attention and maybe get that commercial had obliterated my common sense.
Right. Yeah.
My common sense was in the middle of the, Pacific Ocean at that point. So I went over, and it was one of these very snazzy hotels, the one that Merv Griffin used to own, where they still do the Golden Globes there every year. But anyway, I went to this hotel, knocked on the door, and this guy comes to the door, and he's got his pants off and his fly open, and he grabbed me, right? And he was a very tall, big guy, and I just went like that. I don't know. I just did it. I hit him.
Yeah.
I hit him with the back of my hand right there.
Yeah.
And he went, sort of flying across the room, and I got out.
Yeah.
So, but it was a horrible thing. And I had nightmares about it for years.
Yeah.
Even though, there was no violation in the sense of, but I mean, it was a violation.
There was an intent.
There was intent to violate. And then I had to think, this girl that I know that I work with every day at Universal Studios, she set me up.
Yeah. Was she aware?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. I finally saw that commercial, and who do you think was driving the plow? She was.
Huh.
So I can't say exactly what happened, but I felt set up.
Yeah. Yeah.
I felt set up.
feeling.
So.
But there again, it's the decisions before the
the decisions from me paying for the expensive parking, leaving my friends on a Sunday afternoon when I had it was a series of decisions.
And probably all the way along the way, there were things that were like this. This can't how this goes.
This isn't right. This is you go to a casting office if it's a national commercial. This isn't how it's done. Yeah. And so yes, but my desire for success, and for Daddy's approval, was huge. Yeah. And it overrode what I knew to be true.
Yeah.
What I knew in my gut to be true. So again, listen to your gut. If it feels weird, it probably is.
Yes.
And the straighter that you live as a person, and I'm not saying you can't have a drink or smoke with some.
Right.
That's not what I mean. But the straighter you live as a person, the more soberly you live, and the better your boundaries are put in place, the more sensitive you become.
Mm-hmm.
You can smell. I mean, like now I can smell like a cokehead in a room of 500 people.
Yeah.
And it used to be that person would find me.
Yeah.
So I can smell it. And I like to think that now I have a far better tuned intuition than I did when I was a young actor.
Yeah.
And you don't think that you're immortal, because you're not. Kids think they're immortal. Oh, I can do this and I'll be fine.
Yeah.
What business? I'm 5'1". What business did I have going to a hotel room alone? It's insane, really. So watch those decisions. Listen to your gut.
Listen to your
gut.
Get
Get your boundaries in place. Run your career like a small business.
Yes.
Learn your stuff.
Yeah.
If you need to learn to read music better than you do, if that is going to be a factor in the type of music you do,
right?
And it might not. You might be doing roots music, which is the thing. It might
genre
not apply.
to genre. Some genres it's very important to read, and some genres it doesn't matter at all.
It doesn't matter at all. So but bear in mind that if you get to the point in your career where you are working, you have the joy of hiring professional musicians. They're going to want to be able to communicate with you in standard musical terms.
There needs to be a shared language.
And if you've got that together, you don't have to read the fly specs. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that's what I used, the shared language.
Yeah.
And all of that. But, still in here, I felt insignificant. I felt useless and an idiot. I felt like an idiot. Mm. And that was how it was. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't let myself feel that way anymore.
Yeah.
If I could go back.
Yeah.
I would simply seek out the training that I felt I was missing.
Yeah.
And I'd lay my cards on the table and I said, this is what I have, but can you still teach me about the cycle of fifths in a way that I can keep it in here?
Right. Well, I mean, we could talk all day long.
I know, but I when I got here, my husband was 80. I don't know. How old are you now, dear? 82.
So we'll wrap this up there, but where can people find you?
Oh, I am eminently findable.
Yes.
I would love it if anyone wanted to just email me and say hello.
Yeah.
You can always do that at contacttv.host@gmail.com.
Yeah.
And I do have a little chat pod.
Yeah.
A little chat pod. And you can find, it's called Contact TV, and you can find me on YouTube. And it's a series of interviews with people on a lot of diverse subject matters. Some of it metaphysical, some of it psychological, some of it political. So something for everyone.
Yeah.
And I'm on Facebook as Lesley Mitchell-Clarke.
Okay.
And if you want to know more about the hypnotherapy work that I do, even if you're an artist and you're considering that, remember that I can work on Zoom. I don't have you. I can see you from anywhere, right? Even though I'm based in Toronto. My website is lightworkhypnosis.com. And you can also email me through the website if you'd like to.
Okay.
So there you go.
We'll drop all of those links in the what's the word I'm looking for?
In
Episode notes.
In the episode notes.
No, there's a different name. Show notes.
I'm Dr. Hypno on Instagram.
Right.
So
all the ways.
All the ways.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Lesley. It was lovely to sit here and
Wasn't
chat.
it great? It was great. And I just want to thank you so much for inviting me to share these talks, and hopefully some of my weird experiences will help people to either appreciate the time they're in now.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I would nostalgia. Let's not be overly nostalgic about the days of the record labels.
Right.
Because this is your time out there.
Yeah.
This is your time. And you are going to find a way to manifest your career and your music within your framework in an ethical and healing and loving way.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of that. So I feel incredibly encouraged about the kids coming up now, no matter what kind of music they're doing.
Yeah. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Lovely.
Mon plaisir.